Stephen Brian Pennell was born on the 22nd of November 1957 and was raised by both parents in Glasgow, Delaware. He had an unremarkable childhood and not much has been reported about it, but both parents were present throughout. He made friends at school and was in fact a bright student, although many attempts at securing a place at the University of Delaware after completing a degree in criminology were refused, and then he started to take work as an electrician. Making a steady income and living a normal life, he met and married a lady called Vera and lived as a couple in Delaware. They were happy and had 2 children together. But something was missing in Pennell's life, because in November 1987, he began a terrifying and unheard of crime spree in Delaware, a relatively safe area of the US. The first woman to become Pennell's victim was a young lady by the name of Shirley Anna Ellis. She was just 23 years old and was out delivering a meal to a sick patient in Wilmington Hospital. The hospital was a long 14-mile walk for Shirley, so in 80s fashion, she began to hitchhike. An electrician's blue van stopped and offered her a lift back to her hometown, a decision which was about to cost Shirley her life. On the 29th of November 1987, at around 6 p.m, Shirley got into the van and her mutilated body was found just 3 hours later at the roadside by 2 passers-by. The police were alerted and a hunt was on for a brutal killer. Shirley's death was a shock to the community, and the way in which the poor woman died sent chills through many of the local residents. She had been attacked with tools, tied up, and then hit on the head numerous times with a hammer. The police had made no headway with this case for months, and all was quiet until June 1988, just 7 months after the murder of Shirley, where a second victim was to be named as Kathleen DiMauro. Kathleen was a 31-year-old prostitute and was perusing her usual area for business along Route 40, where she also met her fate with a man in a blue Ford van. And on the 28th of June, her body was found by local workmen at their worksite. She was left naked and tortured. Just like Shirley, her hands were tied to her feet and she was gagged. She was again, just like Shirley, attacked with a hammer. But much to the police's amazement, some blue fibres had been left on the body. When no DNA or important clues were found on Shirley, this was now vital evidence to help with the search of the newly named Route 40 killer. This was to be one of the many names Pennell was to be given. Local police joined forces with the FBI, and information was sent to the public to be aware of a serial killer in Delaware, and over 60 officers were tasked to hunt for this heinous brute. Female officers were being asked to go undercover as prostitutes to help with the case. Only a couple of months after the death of Kathleen, the body of Margaret Finner, aged just 28, was found. She was killed on the 22nd of August 1988, and she was also a prostitute and was seen by many people on the night she was murdered. Police pieced together the night of her death, and the last person to see her saw her get into a blue Ford van with a man near Route 13. She had been missing for 3 months when her body was found floating in the Chesapeake, Delaware Canal. Her body was in such a bad state that the police could not identify how she had been murdered. But with the blue van and the fact that she was a prostitute and the fact that she was a Delaware resident, the murder was assumed to be the Route 40 killers. After months of the police trying to catch this killer, they were still unable to get close. The FBI spent over $1 million on the case and were able to come up with an accurate profile of the killer. And now the net was closing in. Renee Tashner, an undercover policewoman, posed as a prostitute in Pennell's favourite area and was asked to keep a lookout for a man in a blue van. And on the 14th of September 1988, she had seen the van approximately 7 times in 20 minutes. She moved herself to an area where she was less likely to be seen by lots of people to try and lure the man. It worked. The van stopped next to her. Pennell got out and tried to persuade her to get into the van. He opened the back and revealed the blue carpeted floor, fibres of which had been found on 2 out of the 3 victims. When she refused to enter the van, the man got in and drove off, but not before she was able to get a sample of carpet fibre from the floor. The van was traced back to Pennell, and now it was only a matter of time until this killer was caught. Only 2 days after this discovery, the body of Michelle Gordon was found. She was a known sex worker who frequented Route 40 for business. She was also last seen getting into a blue Ford van. Her body was found on the rocks of the same canal as Margaret. She was also tortured in the same way as the other victims. But due to the fact that there wasn't any useful evidence left on Margaret after being in the water for so long, Pennell assumed this was the best way to hide his victims' bodies. Then, on the 23rd of September, 26-year-old Kathleen Meyer had disappeared. A local police officer had seen her get into a blue Ford van and took down the licence plate, which matched to Pennell. Sadly, for her family, her body has never been found. Stephen Brian Pennell was arrested exactly 1 year to the day after his first victim, Shirley, was murdered, and after being followed for months by police, and once the fibres collected had proved to be from the same carpet on the floor of his van, this van was searched and his torture kit was found, as well as blood and hair of the victims. The tape was matched to be the same which was used in the murders. He was charged with the 3 killings, those of Shirley, Catherine and Michelle. Sadly, the murders of the 2 other ladies could not be attached to him directly due to lack of evidence, although they are, to this day, considered on his body count. The local Delaware police were not experienced with conducting such a high-profile murder case. They asked for the FBI to stay and help to secure the conviction. Once Pennell was arrested, he remained silent and shockingly did not contest the 3 murder convictions. He also represented himself in court. His defence attempted to say that the fibres that the undercover policewoman got were obtained illegally and should not be entered in as evidence, but this was overturned by the judge. Halfway through the trial, Pennell's own lawyer stopped representing him because of what he had heard and the detail of the murders he was sent to defend. He also pled to the fact that Pennell showed no hint of remorse for the horrendous crimes he inflicted. The jury stated that he should receive 2 life sentences for his crime and not the death penalty. Delaware had not had any person executed for 46 years and felt that this should not be the time to start. Pennell then sacked his new defence lawyer and defended himself. Another 2 murder charges were put to Pennell, and with the witnesses stacking up on him, he asked for the death penalty. He asked to be executed by lethal injection to stop his family from going through years of him being in prison. In Delaware, when a person is sentenced to the death penalty, they must have a second hearing from the Supreme Court. This took place on the 31st of October 1991, and it was no shock. Pennell was still sentenced to death. He had made history as being the only serial killer in Delaware and the only convicted man to actively ask for the death penalty. His execution was set for March the 14th, 1992. Pennell's wife made 2 appeals to attempt to save her husband's life, both of which failed. And on the scheduled date of the 14th of March 92, Pennell was executed by lethal injection. He took the location of Meyer's body to the grave with him and remained silent, not making any last declaration or any last words. He didn't even have a last request. He was the first person to be executed in 46 years in Delaware and the 165th person to be executed since 1976, when the death penalty was reinstated. The question is, should Pennell have been allowed to ask for the death penalty, or should he have been made to spend the rest of his life in prison? Thank you for listening to Crime Busters. Please hit the like button if you have enjoyed this story. Please subscribe to us if you would like to listen to more crime stories from Crime Busters as we take you to the dark side.